Welcome to the Three Times Podcast. This is the second part of my conversation with David Oliver, a passionate advocate of community participation in music and the driving force behind the Hexham Village Band. In this episode, we talk about why music is an inherently important thing, the state of music education, and the obstacles that people face when they want to make music for themselves. And because this is a bonus episode, we have a bonus ambient effect. Today, as well as the creaky chair, it's the family cat. So I'm intrigued to hear you talk about how people are deterred from learning about music in the youth. I was. My music teacher was dreadful. Uh-huh. So what kind of obstacles do you think adults face if they've had that kind of school career where if they were not actively deterred, then they were certainly not encouraged.
Yeah.
What kind of obstacles do you think they face as adults if they want to, kind of express themselves musically?
I think we're all different, and so I can only generalise. I'm not saying this applies to everyone, but I think in a lot of cases it is that fear of failure or having been made to think that music is difficult. I can't do this. That's something I say in workshops. I don't ever want to hear anyone say I can't do this. You can say I'm not doing it yet, or you can say I'm not doing it as well as I want to, but you never ever say I can't do this. And yes, I do think I have seen a child of mine at a school not far from here in a rehearsal for a Christmas Carol concert, and there were children not allowed to be in the choir because they were told they couldn't sing. I just think that's verging on abuse. In fact, it is. And then when the choir were rehearsing, the teacher yelling at them, absolutely top of the teacher's voice, I won't even say what gender it was, "Will you stand still when you are singing?" And I thought, what is that about? I know an African language where there's no difference between the word for sing and dance. They don't understand the difference. Yeah. Singing is dance, and I love that. So I think that in some cases it's experience at school, and a feeling that music is something that's written down. Mm-hmm. People say to you, "Have you brought your music?" Meaning, have you brought some bits of paper with you? And that you've got to learn to read music in order to play it. Well, I love the fact that through folk music I've met some of the world's greatest musicians who can't read a note of music. Yeah. Willie Taylor, great Northumbrian fiddle player, was once asked in a recorded interview, how do you go about writing a tune, Will? You've written some great tunes, how do you do it? He said, well, he says, I've never been able to answer that question because, you see, I know nothing about music. I love that. I know nothing about music. He was only a great player, and he wrote some of the best Northumbrian tunes of the last century. And so there's that thing that music is difficult, it's inaccessible, it's an elite thing, which is something we've really, really got to fight against. Another thing that's an obstacle for adults learning is that young people learn so quickly. Yeah. If I told you that I made the village band, a rule of the village band, you must be 16 years and over. Now, I'd had something to do with setting up some youth band projects in Hexham for teenagers, youngsters aged 12 and upwards. And I'd run summer schools, folk music summer schools for Folkworks, and a youth summer school, an adult summer school, and a junior summer school. And we made quite sure that the adult summer school was very different from the youth summer school, because some of these teenagers, the rate at which they learn is scary. Yeah. And the speed at which they develop skill, because they're so highly motivated and so on. And that is enough to put off some adults. And so I'm not saying the adults is for slower learners or anything like that, but it's a more comfortable environment. Yeah. And I think another thing and I've learned most of these tricks from people that I've worked with, I realised that a good idea with this community band in Hexham was to give them a gig very soon.
Mm-hmm.
So 6 weeks after we started, we played for a ceilidh.
All right.
So say, right, folks, we've got a gig. Come on, let's get on with it. We learned 12 tunes, so we could do 12 dances. We used to play the same tune all the way through one dance. And these people, I got a note from one of them the following morning, and it said, I'm 55 years old. I'm just going to get me this. I've never played music in public before, and this person just felt so fantastic, so elated that they could do it, and it wasn't just a little short performance for their family and friends. It was a public event for which people had paid tickets, and the people in the room were having such a great time because of the music we were making. So giving people confidence to express themselves in a safe, comfortable, stimulating, informal setting. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. That's another important observation, because people who create music have a compulsion for other people to listen to it, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, you, and it's the same with other art forms. You can paint for your own pleasure, but you like other people to see it.
Yeah.
You can write short stories or whatever, but people want to publish them so that other people can read them. And it's the same in music. You create music, but you want other people to hear it, don't you? There is this kind of two-way thing between the composer and the audience that's almost innate, isn't
Paul
it?
McCartney said, there's no point making cinder toffee if you eat it all yourself.
That's true.
I love that. That's in A Hard Day's Night. There's no point making cinder toffee unless you share it with people so they can see how good it is. It's true of music as well. But of course some people are very scared. I am. I don't like performing solo. One of the things I love about the music I make now is that the two contexts in which I play it are the barn dance and the pub session. It's where the music really lives. No, it's not for a listening audience, although people do hear it and enjoy it, but it's not for them. And nobody's listening to me. They're just kind of listening to the whole thing. And yet it's purposeful. And playing ceilidh dance, how you play is very important. When you play for a ceilidh, you've got to make it feel as if the dancers are the cleverest people in the world. You've got to make them think, we knew what to do, Well, actually, the band is driving the tempo and the phrasing and all that.
That's right.
And so, that you mentioned it, two-way energy.
It's another of these innate things about music that I struggle to understand. I mean, it is just there, and I kind of want it explained, but I've never found a satisfactory account of it.
Well, and I think it must be true that humans, I nearly said men, but humans have always felt the need to make music. And it has all sorts of purposes to it. Rugby crowds, it's cohesion, isn't it? It's social cement. My friend Sandra Kerr said singing is social cement. Vaughan Williams understood the importance of people singing together. So although he was an agnostic, he made sure that hymn singing and carol singing were for the people and everyone could join in, etc., etc. And in any culture, at any time in history, people have found ways of making music, either vocally or by making instruments. But the making of instruments, I mean, it's one of the most wonderful expressions of what humans are capable of. I went to Cremona a couple of years ago with my wife. My wife is an Italian specialist, so we go to Italian cities. We went to Cremona where Stradivarius made violins, and it's obviously it's like a hub violin. When you look at what's involved in making a violin, it's fantastic. And I remember once, I don't know whether this is a good digression or not, during the lockdown I was watching a classical concert being played on TV. It might have been, I don't think it was a prom, but it was like that. And all the musicians were having to be separate from each other, and either there was no audience, only immediate audience, or there was a very small audience. And I got to thinking, what's involved in creating a symphony concert? Because I do love symphony concerts. To be in a hall, it'd be great to be in the orchestra, but just being in the hall, the physical thrill of that wonderful music, reverberating through your whole body, it's fantastic. So I got to thinking, this is my mind sort of wandering freely. about instrument makers, parents who take children to violin lessons, and music teachers, and then music publishers and composers, people who, anyone involved in getting a person into a hall with a great instrument playing wonderful music. It's a fantastic example of human collaboration to a worthy end. None of this could happen if it wasn't for, all these people, the instrument makers, the teachers, the bus drivers, etc., etc. So the music, it's inexpressibly important. And so I sometimes despair at our policymakers who marginalise music and make it a minority subject in schools.
And ignore the contribution to the economy that
absolutely
music makes.
If you have to do it, you can justify music making purely in economic terms.
You can. Yeah.
It shouldn't have to. To me, it's self-justifying. But there is a very strong case. One of my great beliefs is that if every primary school everywhere in the world, as well as having a numeracy hour and a literacy hour, had a 15-minute singing and dancing, if all primary school children all over the world sang and danced with their teachers in their classroom for a quarter of an hour every day, everything in the world would be better.
I think that's true.
There would be fewer wars, there would be fewer disputes, there would be more happy people, there would be benefits to the economy all over the place.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe what I just said, and people might think I'm crazy, but it's so easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I did when I worked for Folkworks was we ran some training courses for teachers. Before that, we used to go into schools and do things, and it was nice. Children enjoyed our concerts or our workshops. And we said, suppose we train teachers to use music in the classroom. No, I'm not talking about music specialists. I'm talking about ordinary classroom teachers, just to get children singing and dancing. And if we spread that all over the world, well, it's all going to be better. And I think that was true. And another of my passionate beliefs, if we gave all children happy teachers, if we could arrange things so that teachers were enthusiastic, happy individuals, and passionate about music, well, just passionate about something, and felt confident, happy, confident and enthusiastic, well, it's obvious, isn't it? The world would be better. So.
It would. The trouble is that the education system is facing many challenges.
I'm
has done for some time now.
Yeah, but let's not go there.
While we're on the subject of young people, given that music education in schools at the moment is probably quite a low ebb, isn't it? Because I think a lot of fun has been taken away, and it's been taken out of the core curriculum. I might not be using the right words there, but it's not part of it.
Yeah, it's not part of the basic entitlement.
That's right, yeah. What opportunities do you think there are for children and young people to develop their interests outside of institutions like that?
Yeah, well, I think that is the problem. It's having to be done outside institutions. When I started my teaching career in 1971, I discovered something I didn't know until that point, that any child at a state school could have free music tuition with instrument loan. It was provided. It was called the Peripatetic Music Service, and that's been taken away. And so music has, first of all, local authorities started having to charge parents to have music lessons for their children, and the children would have to provide their own instruments. Well, that immediately makes it a bit elitist. But in many cases the service had disappeared altogether, so there are plenty of schools you can go to where you cannot get music instrument tuition, whether you pay for it or not. And of course that peripatetic music service, it led all sorts of people into musical careers, into not necessarily classical music, of course, all sorts of other musical careers, and made for a healthier community generally. It's gone. And so it's now up to volunteer organisations, art centres, youth centres. In some parts of this country there is still a brass band tradition, for instance, where a young person can join fantastic music making opportunities. But it's patchwork, it's kind of postcode lottery sort of thing, depends where you live. It isn't part of everyone's entitlement anymore. So it is up to volunteers and to people who can see the benefits to individuals and to communities of music to create opportunities, and they do exist. But like I say, it's patchwork, and it's not. It isn't the state providing equal opportunity for everyone. There are problems when the state provides things, because sometimes it can be that the state organises it, it prescribes it. I'm not a great believer in a national curriculum. I think the person who devises the curriculum for the child, it should be that child's teacher. And I think that when the state imposes a particular model of learning and with particular outcomes, that's dodgy. The state should support the provision of, that's how it used to be with education. The state nationally streamed funding to local authorities, and the local authorities arranged an education service that was suitable for their particular communities. It's not so true anymore. And with music, it would scare me a little bit if all children were forced to learn a particular kind of music. But there should be a national recognition of the kind of things we've been talking about, the importance in life, and to individuals and to communities and to nations, of engagement with music. There should be a recognition of that. It should be just taken, and there are plenty of countries where that is the case. Mm-hmm. But often it depends on the work of individuals. I got to know Shetland quite well through various Folkworks projects. There are 5 high schools in Shetland. This may not be true now, but I'm pretty sure it was true when I was working there in the sort of 90s and early noughties. There are 5 high schools. Each has a full-time fiddle teacher teaching Shetland fiddle and other music. In Shetland, I think it would be fair to say it is as common to see someone walking along a road with a fiddle case on their back as it would be to see someone walking around Newcastle with a snooker cue or a fishing rod or something. It's like, okay, we're not all top fiddlers, but playing the fiddle is part of what we do. And I just think, wouldn't it be healthy if every school in the country had a full-time fiddle teacher? Mm-hmm. If there was only one instrument, I would probably want it to be the fiddle, although I'm not very good at playing the violin myself. I have to play fiddle music on the accordion, but I think it doesn't matter whether it's the fiddle, the tin whistle, or whatever, but some instrument that's accessible to people on which they can find expression. I just think that would be a very healthy thing.
Yeah. Can I take you back to a comment you made just before we started talking about young people? You mentioned playing spontaneously in the pub.
Yeah.
I think you do a weekly session, don't you?
Monthly.
Monthly session.
There are weekly sessions.
Yeah.
There's one that I'm involved in, which is monthly.
Yeah. It's something that, I mean, I don't go into pubs very much, but it's something that it seems to me has become more popular in the past, I don't know, 5 to 10 years than it used to be for some time.
Yeah.
It kind of died out, I thought, in the 1970s when there were lots of pub bands.
Yeah.
And you used to go to a pub and there'd be a very loud band.
Yeah.
And you would listen to the band. There was no participation apart from jumping up and down and cheering and dancing, as we said. But and in the sense of making music, there was no participation. And then it seemed, I probably wasn't mixing in the right circles, but it seemed to me that there wasn't a lot of spontaneous music making going on in pubs. But now there seems to have been a resurgence.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Also in the 70s there was a revival of folk clubs.
Yeah.
A folk club would be somewhere where people could go and there would be a guest artist, often someone quite well known, who would perform for maybe an hour or so, or 2 45-minute sets in the evening. But for the rest of the evening it was club singers who either just turned up and sang one song, or might get free admission if they sang a song, but clubs they get. And so it's a platform, a fairly comfortable, safe environment for someone to try their hand at singing in public or playing in public. But the session is different. The session is just people, mainly instrumental, playing tunes together. And there are those, I have met people who rather regret the demise of the folk club, and there's too many sessions going on, and young people don't want to come to folk clubs. But they serve very different purposes, the folk club and the session. And the session is, I just think that's where the folk music really, really lives.
Yeah.
You can get folk music on CDs and on videos and at festivals, in concerts, big tours and so on. And yeah, it's folk music, but the very essence of this music is just sitting in an informal, it could be a kitchen, it doesn't have to be a pub, but some sort of informal environment, a social environment where people feel comfortable. And anyone can join in. There's no leadership, there's no agenda, nobody sets a programme in advance. Someone will start a tune, and those who want to and who can just join in. Yeah. To me that is a really, really healthy thing. But even in sessions there are people who feel, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't join in.
Yes.
So some of us try to make such people feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
Kind of go and have a quiet word with them, say, what tunes do you know? And they'll tell you a tune. So then a few minutes later they'll start playing that tune and they can join in, or play tunes slower, gentler, more times through, so people can pick them up as they go along. Good sessions are fully inclusive, and yeah, it's to me, as I say, that and the village hall full of people dancing to a live folk band are the very essence of where folk music really lives.
Yeah. So how do you think that things? This is entirely speculation, but how do you think things will develop over these kind of social events will develop over the next 10 to 20 years, given the way that popular music in its broader sense is diversified? We have so many genres now that young people enjoy. I mean, some people like all sorts of music, and some people only play or listen to grime, or because it's so culturally specific for them. And you get the impression that to them folk music would be a kind of an alien concept. And I'm not suggesting that we should do that, but it's an illustration of how people have become focused on narrow aspects of music. So have you thought about how things might evolve in the coming years?
No, I haven't. But you're asking me to, and that's okay. I have a strong feeling that, like I said to you earlier, there are so many young people, I'm talking about people in their 30s and 40s, but also people in their teens, that I happen to know about, who are discovering this kind of music making. And I think there's enough of that going on for me to feel that in a few decades' time, when I and my contemporaries aren't here, it'll still be okay. Because I think one of the great things about food music, this has happened to me, it's happened to my children, and I can see it happen to lots and lots and lots and lots of other people. When you get into it, as it were, the thing you want to do more than anything else is to share it with other people and pass it on. And it's passing it on is one of the defining qualities of folk music. It's not just, oh, it's a nice thing to do. It only stays alive because it's constantly refreshed. It's like all living organisms. It needs continuity and change. Both of those things are important. I think one of the things that does happen is that people who are into folk music are likely to expose their children to it by going to festival, either deliberate by saying we are going to a folk festival this week, and whether you like it or not, we're going to be camping and we're going to be hearing some great bands, but there's going to be sessions going on. Because children right down to a very young age want to join in when they get to a decent festival. Or they'll be taken to ceilidh dances, or they might, as they get a little bit older, find themselves in pub sessions. And for some people it isn't, it's not for them. But I think for a lot of people it is. I think the most important thing my son Joey, he's a very, very good tin whistle player, ceilidh dance caller, etc., teacher. He once put it very simply. He said to me, he said, the important thing isn't to try and preserve the music, it's to preserve the contexts. If we keep encouraging pubs to open their back room to musicians, if we keep village halls holding live barn dances and ceilidhs, the music will look after itself, and I think there's a lot in that. So keeping the social context alive is probably the key. Yeah,
yeah. In fact, you could argue that other forms of music are enjoyed in much the same way. I'm talking here about something that I have very little understanding of, but there are things. I'm not sure if they're called rap battles. I'm sounding like a really old white man now, but where rappers get together and they will kind of face off against each other with spontaneous rap.
Yeah, yeah.
Now that's a kind of a folk music. The expression of the music form is the same. It's a different musical genre, but it's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And jazzers love to get together and jam.
Yeah.
They might do a jazz concert, and then but afterwards, when they go to the bar and meet with other musicians, that's when they really love jamming, creating the music as it happens. You know, and that moment can't be pinned down, and it's gone, but it was great. So and I used to, when I first got into folk music, I used to think it was the same. A jam session was the same as a folk session, but it's not actually. And jam sessions, some of these sort of stuff. I'm not an expert here, but a riff or some sort of basic melodic structure will be introduced, and then people mess around with that, build on it, create. I don't mean make a mess. I mean they have fun finding new things in it. Whereas in folk music, you play a tune, and everybody plays the tune their own way, but it's not the same as you're not improvising. The actual melodic flow. You're playing together. But the session. And so in Hexham, we have a session once a month at the tannery, open to everyone. It's an opportunity for people who are in the village band who come to a workshop every Saturday morning to play the tunes that we learn in a proper context of a session. But it's also an opportunity for anyone from anywhere to come and join us.
And do people who are not skilled musicians come and join in? Are they brave?
Well, sometimes, and sometimes you sometimes get a group of people in a pub who happen to be there. Now, they haven't gone out looking for music. In fact, once we start playing, they sometimes leave the room. But sometimes you get groups of those people and they start looking as if they're enjoying it. So you can actually do something as stupid as go over and give them a spoon and an ashtray and say, here, join in, or whatever. Draw them in, and you can imagine people doing that. They have such fun showing off to their friends, just hitting a bloody ashtray, for goodness sake. So yes, and I have known people who are drawn into folk music because they've stumbled upon a session, not because they've been to a course or deliberately gone out to see a folk concert. But I do think it's one of the things about folk music is that those who are good practitioners do want to pass it on. Partly because very few people can make a full-time living as a folk musician. Most have to do some teaching of some sort. For many it's a part-time thing. But I think it's not just economic necessity. I think it is this desire to share. To share it. Strong. So yes, folk music can be passed on in a pub to a total musical novice, and you never know where it might lead.
That's right. So, that's right. Because that brings us to the way that funding for music has changed so much, doesn't it? Because people now have access to any music that they want at the touch of a finger on a phone. And so I hear commentators in the media saying, well, they don't value music anymore. In our day, we used to have to save up to buy an LP, and then it was a big ceremony to put it on, and we all sat around and listened to it in all silence, that kind of thing. But now music is just everywhere. It's on in the background, and even in my case, I rarely sit down and listen to music and do nothing else. I'm always doing the ironing or doing the cooking or whatever. It's all I'm physically occupied with something else, and the music is sort of occupying my mind.
Yeah.
So
and we all do that. You
we
know,
all do that.
If I'm reading or if I'm in the workshop, I often have music, instrumental music,
Uh-huh.
different with its vocal music. But yeah, but I don't think we need to think very hard to imagine 100 years ago or just a bit more, the days before recorded music. So, you know, in the lifetime of my parents, there was no recorded music, no broadcast music. So two things. One, if you wanted to hear Beethoven's Choral Symphony, you had to wait until a performance came near you, and then you had to go and experience it as it happens, and it was probably once in a lifetime. Whereas now I can play the Choral Symphony every single day of my life,
Yes.
if I want to. But the other thing is, if you wanted music in the home, you had to play instruments or sing. And so, or go to church or whatever. But all music before recording music obviously had to be made on the spot. I'm not nostalgic or sort of sentimental enough to say I wish we could get back to those days, but you can see how healthy it was, where if you wanted music, you made it. Yeah. And that often meant making the instruments. How skillful those miners and shepherds were who made Northumbrian bagpipes. You know, you do your day's work either in the fields or in the pit, and you've got long evenings to fill, and you fill them sort of painstakingly over months or years, making a beautiful thing so that you can play music in your home. Isn't that fantastic?
Yes, yeah.
So we need to remember and think about that, I think.
Yeah. I'm wondering, but maybe I'm being a bit harsh, I'm wondering whether people who are not actively involved in music and who don't seek it out value music enough because it's so readily accessible, and they don't have to engage with it really.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a background noise to them.
Yeah.
I wonder whether that's I don't know whether it's got any significance at all for what we're talking about, or whether it's an unhealthy thing for the way people think about music in general.
Well, no, I think it's highly relevant to any thought about music and people and communities. I think that music is undervalued in the way that you say, but I'll tell you what else is undervalued, even worse, and that's silence. I wish I could find a pub where they don't play background music, where the atmosphere is created by the hubbub of human conversation. I wish I could walk into some stores and not be bombarded with... And I do think that the people who work in shops, there are shops where there's loud music being played all day. Do the employers, the owners, ever think about the mental health of their employees? And yeah, beautiful paintings wouldn't look so beautiful if they were placed on a wall that was completely covered with paintings, with not even any frames in between. And I sometimes think that music needs silence to surround it. It needs that context of being placed into. You feel fairly strong.
No, I agree. I hadn't thought about that for a long time, but I don't like going into shops.
I find background music stressful because it means I have to raise my voice. Everyone else talking raises their voice. All right, at the end of the evening. Yeah. And I once had a discussion with someone in a quiet country pub where we went, and as soon as we walked in, ordered a drink, they put music on, and I sort of said, do you have to do that? And they said, well, for quite a lot of people, if there's not many people in the pub or the restaurant or the cafe or whatever, people don't actually want their conversations to be overheard, and so we put some background music on. I do understand that, but it doesn't have to be loud, and it doesn't have to be constant. And once there's enough people in the cafe or pub or whatever, so that people can't overhear each other's conversation, I think it's a much nicer environment if there's just talk. Yeah. So that's just me. Yeah. Peggy Seeger, who I admire hugely, carries little slips around with her from a little couple of quotations published by, I don't think it's the Noise Abatement Society, but it's some sort of authority that has created itself to encourage the absence of background music, and she would give it to certain kind of shopkeepers and say, I'm not shopping in your store because I haven't got the courage to do that.
It is 5 to 11.
Yeah, I'll have to stop now. If you
That's
don't
fair enough.
mind.
No, I think we have covered an enormous amount of ground.
Yeah, I think the only thing maybe was being to say more about what's actually happening in Hexham and the Tyne Valley. But
That's the whole purpose of the podcast, so I can't put that on your shoulders exclusively.
absolutely, well, that's the last thing I would want.
Thanks for listening to the 3 Times podcast. You can follow Hexham Village Band on Facebook, where you'll find information about their upcoming ceilidhs. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Please remember to subscribe and tell your friends about the podcast.